So next up we have Tayyaba Ali, who is going to talk to us a little bit about gene drives, which is a topic that we've had a lot of discussion about today. So I think this is super on theme, and I'm very excited about that. Love themes. Tayyaba, please tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and who you are, and what you're talking about.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Tayyaba, Tay for short. I'm from Chicago, currently a undergrad student, but I also run my own startup. Previously, I was in biotech, and I ran a biotech medical type 2 medical device company. And now I'm more into biohacking. Specifically, I work in the bioremediation field. So basically, finding a way to deal with pollution in a more eco-friendly manner. So, but today I will be talking about, let's see if I can share my slides. Sorry, give me one sec. Can you guys see it? Yes, no, maybe?
Yep, looks good. Yeah.
So, all right, so I'll be talking about the ethics behind using gene editing and drive on parasites, vectors, or invasive species. So just an overview of the talk. I really do want to leave enough time for discussion because I do think morality and ethics is a very discussion-based activity, and I could sit here and lecture you about what my opinions are, but it only anything in the more medical and biotech and now even like environmental things only get done when there is a active discussion around the topic. So what we'll be discussing is first, I'll talk to you about how human impact has changed the natural behaviors of the selected organisms. Then we'll talk about the effects of the organisms on the ecosystems and on humans. We'll discuss what gene drive technology is. And finally, more of an open discussion, open platform, we'll discuss the morality of this decision. So the three specimen we're focusing on today are mosquitoes, ticks, as well as rats. Now, this is divided into two things. Mosquitoes and ticks are more on the base of effects on humans, right? Versus the rats are going to be more effects on the environment. So just wanted to split that up. So obviously, as most of you know, mosquitoes cause a lot of problems. I have listed those more commonly known diseases and as well as ticks. But the thing about rats is while they may not cause as many issues directly onto humans, there's only two bigger ones. What they do is cause a lot of environmental damage. So rats, unfortunately, in most areas they're found nowadays, they're not native species, right? So that means that they're drastically killing the natural ecosystem of that specific area. So I believe there was a Netflix movie or a documentary released recently talking about the New Zealand effect, also on gene drive, which is, if you have not watched it, totally recommend. It's something on the terms of biohacking or CRISPR. So basically, New Zealand, for example, is currently suffering a huge rat problem. And these rats are human caused, right? So they came when people started migrating to New Zealand, and now it's completely destroying the natural ecosystem. They're eating all the birds, and more birds are very native, and that's has a ripple effect, right? So while mosquitoes and ticks, their biggest impact is on humans and obviously livestock and other animals, the impact of rats, because they are an invasive species, is more on the environment itself. So point is, all three of these animals cause a significant amount of damage. So we can sit here and be like, well, this is like natural, this is like how it's supposed to be, like this is nature doing what it does best. Like you can sit here and talk about how this is evolution, right? This is evolution. We should not interfere with evolution. But unfortunately, a lot of these problems are human caused. And if we were to remove humans from it and just have let these animals evolve naturally without human interjection, the results would have been drastically different. For example, climate change. Mosquitoes populations are actually growing, and the amount of people who are going to be affected by mosquitoes by 2050 is going to double. So before it was usually in the hotter climates, right? Or if it was seasonal, especially if you're somewhere like me, where I'm in Chicago, it's very seasonal. But now, since temperatures are increasing by 2 to 3 degrees, Chicago is way warmer. This is one of the most hottest Octobers we've had. It's currently 80 degrees. So chances of having a mosquito still be present is much higher. Same with ticks, the increase in temperatures and urbanization, because the type of nutrients that are available to tick carrying species are now more in urban areas, and such as gardens, right? The plants, deers will eat them, they carry ticks, they'll expose it to your animals, they'll expose it to you, you can get something. So that is also human cause. Urbanization is human cause. Increase in temperature is human cause. As well as, and then finally, rats. Global warming as well. Warmer weather means they breed for longer and they eat for longer and they live for longer, right? And on top of that, there's also migration. Usually when people migrate, they bring pathogens, they bring diseases, and they also bring rats. So a lot of these are human caused issues. So this brings the big question of, so what can we do about it? Yes, you can go the more traditional route of just spraying yourself or trying to kill the rats with poison, but there is another method, and that's gene drive. I'm going to skip you the more scientific explanation and just simplify it. Gene drive is basically when you take an organism's offspring, and the ability of them to inherit a gene traditionally would be 50-50, right? And what you're going to do is increase that probability. And this has a drastic impact on the microevolution of the organism. Usually on a micro scale, there isn't much changes that are made. It's usually on the macro scale, but now you're drastically changing in a few generations, basically the survival or outcome of a whole.
Tayyaba, did you mute yourself? I can't hear you all of a sudden.
People that die from mosquito-borne diseases, right? And even tick-borne diseases are becoming way more prevalent. And the quality of life of these human beings are drastically impacted. And the big question in medicine, right, just to interlace it, is you're supposed to do no harm, and you're supposed to have the patient's best interest in mind. So on a medical standpoint, it would be immoral, right, to, if you could prevent human suffering, why wouldn't you prevent human suffering? But then there's also the ethical question. For example, mosquitoes, they are pollinators, right? And ticks, for example, they serve as one of the multiple nutrient sources that their predators eat. But there's also other pollinators in those areas that mosquitoes act as pollinators. And with ticks, they're only a small percentage of the animal's diets, and an easier transition can be done if you just increase the other form. So obviously when you use gene editing, it's not just, hey, let's change this and now we don't have any more of that species. There's also other things you need to take into account and things that would need to be changed. But this is the question: do you think we should do it? And if we should be able to do it, should governments be in this process? Should it be government regulated? Does a whole country need to decide? Does it need to be on more of a UN level? Or can someone just decide, hey, I don't like mosquitoes, I'm just going to release this gene drive, edited mosquito, and let's hope for the best, right? And how do we stop it? Are we even able to stop it? So the great thing for a lot of gene drive experiments is that results can be reversed if needed. And they can also be contained to some degree. For example, there was a big push to eradicate rats in New Zealand because obviously they were affecting the natural ecosystem there. So if you eradicate rats in New Zealand, which is an island basically surrounded by water, right, it won't affect the rat population in other places. And also you can keep the DNA and obviously repopulate if need be in certain areas. And these experiments have already started, especially with the mosquitoes. I believe the Gates Foundation, let's see if I can find Oxitec, which partnered up with the Gates Foundation, is trying to eradicate mosquitoes. Certain lab settings have been done for ticks as well, trying to eradicate ticks. And there has been a big push on an international level to help New Zealand eradicate rats using gene drive. So now I just want to open up, I guess, the floor. Else, feel free to share.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. That was great. Yeah, anyone who has any comments or questions about this topic, please feel free.
I'd like to pipe in. So one of the things so we did like for one of the iGEM hackathon workshops, we did something on like just gene drive policies and some kind of a framework to think about them. So one of the big things that came up during the research was that most likely every different government will take their own path in doing this. And even when it comes to like in the cases of international treaties, it's super hard to make any government enforce them. The second thing that usually comes up with any of these kinds of frameworks is the government has to be involved with it, but even the larger academic community needs to be involved because commercial entities usually develop this. So there are a lot of players that need to be considered, including like whoever is there. Like if you go in a forest and start releasing these GMO organisms, there should be like consent from the people who live there and everything. And I missed the whole indigenous consent part over here, but maybe somebody from there can actually talk about it because it's a more complex process when it comes to implementation.
Of course. So, but then the question comes like, how do we stop individuals from doing it? Because there's always going to be some biohacker that decides like, hey, let me take this on myself, right? I can stop human suffering. So what are the ramifications? Because it is not illegal in the US to do this or on an international level. So should there be ramifications of doing it when, if it is a quote unquote reversible action?
I think the FBI knows if you're doing this, so I would be very interested because FBI actually keeps track of like most of the research that goes on, or even like biohackers and stuff. That's one of their bigger things. If you ever gone to iGEM, they have a booth there too. So.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a couple more minutes left.
Oh, Eugene raised his hand.
Oh, great.
Hello. I think your talk was great. Lots of things to consider. But anyone who's worked with bugs like fruit flies in a lab, they know how they tend to get out. And the mosquitoes in the US, I think they hitched rides on airplanes and stuff. So if you have something that has gone into the wild, it's pretty much uncontainable, right? What happens if, so someone had pointed out that Oxitec is limiting their research to Aedes aegypti, but what happens if we go to total nuclear option? What if they decided to completely wipe out with the Oxitec gene drives all mosquitoes from everywhere in the world? What is the effect on the ecosystem?
So the biggest effect on more of a local scale is pollination, right? So as a result, especially in areas that don't have as many other pollinators, there will be a decrease in natural occurring plants and herbs and stuff that do need that pollination. But just on whole scale, that effect would take so long. It's not just one generation, it's multiple generations, especially if that was a spread.
I think they did a limited test somewhere in the US, somewhere in the South. I think it was like Texas or Florida or something. But I think they had very close to 100% eradication with their small tests in those areas. And it was just one summer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey. Thank you so much, Tay, for that amazing presentation. That was really interesting. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who asked questions.